There's a few interesting position battles for Penn State football going into next season with wide receiver, cornerback, and now linebacker. And if you're still thinking it, just in case, no, quarterback isn't one of them.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily Penn State Nittany Lions podcast. I am your host, Zach Seyko, and we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more is a winner. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The everydayers remember him, and Penn State football fans know him well. Aeneas Hawkins, former Penn State football player, defensive lineman, now the host of the Lions Den over at State Media. You can keep up with that show by subscribing to State Media on YouTube. You can follow Aeneas and State Media accounts on X, formerly known as Twitter, and your other social media platforms. Aeneas, thanks so much for the time again.
Zach, appreciate you having me. First ever co-host Zach Seyko here, so it's always a pleasure to spin the block, run it back again. It's a pleasure to be here, brother.
And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports, talking football, men's basketball, men's hockey, wrestling, recruiting, all that and more here on the show. And we're talking key position battles to open up the show. And then I think it's important to get a player's perspective on the actual importance of winter workouts, since we can't really all agree the competitor of the day, how important is it? So we'll wrap up the show with that. But key position battles, we'll begin with the offense, then go to the defense. I'm thinking when I look at the offense, wide receivers an obvious one. The second group of wide receivers, offensive line, because you lose three starters. Your second tight end, I know Khalil Dinkins might have the inside lead on that, but there are some other talented players, as we know, in the tight end room. But Aeneas, I guess, just clear my conscience first. There's no quarterback battle, right? People are trying to tell me there's a quarterback battle because of these winter workouts.
Well, I will say this, I've seen the banter on Twitter about winter workout warrior of the day and XYZ, and all of that stuff is important. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that later. I don't think there's a legitimate quarterback battle on our hands right now, in the sense that Drew Aller is going to be your starting quarterback unless something goes drastically wrong or takes a hard left turn. But what I will say is that as Beau Pribula continues to get older, the conversation has to start happening with how do you retain him? How do you keep him in that blue and white? So you're going to see him continue to get more opportunities. And not only that, but he's a guy that's earned some opportunity. He goes in there in game, does well. The guys in the locker room respect him. So no, there's no quarterback controversy yet, but Beau Pribula is going to be constantly working. He's talented enough to where if things do take a hard left turn, he will be a guy that's in a great position to go play quarterback for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, and I think the idea is that if everything goes well, this will be Drew Aller's final season in 2024, goes to the NFL draft, and then Beau Pribula takes over. But if something does go wrong, a wrench is thrown into those plans, then it could get interesting as you run out of time in college football, as we all know, with the way that the sport works. As far as some other position battles go, how would you rank those in terms of importance, right? We know the starters at wide receiver, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Julian Fleming, and Trey Wallace. We know those are going to be the top three, but I think that second group, those next men up are going to be the most important, because as we saw, Penn State just had, I guess, limited identity as far as its wide receiver position went a season ago. You just needed somebody to stand out. Trey Wallace was banged up on and off the football field and everything. And then Keandre Lambert-Smith had his moments, and then Dante Cephas transfers out. You have Julian Fleming now transferring in, and we know that he will help improve in things in like run blocking and whatnot, maybe add some and leadership element as well. So if you want, starting with the wide receivers and then moving to offensive line, because you have to replace three starters, who are the next guys up that you're looking at and saying, these players could get starter reps if things go well, because they're that good?
Yeah, I mean, the first guy I'll point to is Liam Clifford. He's a guy that's played meaningful snaps, and he's played in a lot of games. And he's a guy that is going to have to take another leap if he wants to continue to get on the field more. You mentioned Julian Fleming coming into town. You know what you got in Keandre Lambert-Smith. And Trey Wallace is a guy who I think people forget, that injury bug really played a crucial role in what he was able to do last season. When healthy, he's another guy that can go compete at a high level. But with injuries, with the state of the wide receiver room, and the question marks we kind of all had there after last season, I think Liam Clifford is the first guy I'm looking at to step up. Another guy, Omari Evans, who has had some buzz around his name, then some crickets around it too. I'm interested to see if he finds some of that consistency with another year in the program. And again, you talk about the leadership in the room. Julian Fleming, I know we're talking about the number twos. He's got to be a guy that can come in and take control of that room, along with guys like Keandre, who have been there for a long time. And the reality is, for Penn State's offense to take that next step, which we all are hoping to see, that receiver room is going to have to step up in a big way. So to me, Liam Clifford, Omari Evans are the first two that I'm looking at as guys who may have to take starter reps and who will need to take a leap heading into 2024.
I think Malik Mega, and that's somebody that over the past 2 years, just you and I being acquainted with one another, we did ESPN radio, state college talk shows together, pre and post game coverage for the Penn State football games. And a lot of times we were always just kind of in casual conversation or analysis, bringing up a player like Malik Mega, who was special teams captain a season ago, but he wants the name of his game to be a standout wide receiver. So where do you think he is now, being a true veteran on this team? Like, he's one of the oldest players on the team now. What kind of contributions can he make as being that fourth, fifth wide receiver in line to go on the field?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing with Malik is, sometimes when you see a guy who kind of coincidentally gets bumped down the depth chart and doesn't get to play a whole lot in the position that they were recruited to play, is that there might be a talent gap or a talent issue. Malik Mega, when you watch him as a football player, when you watch the work he does on special teams, he possesses all of the skills needed to go be a contributing factor on the offense. He's another guy. I think you bring up a great point. He's a veteran leader. He's not a captain by accident. He's a captain because the guys in the locker room, that staff, respect his work ethic, and they understand that he's a guy who brings a ton of value on the field. So, yeah, he's a guy that can step up. I think, to me, the thing with Malik is how much more polish can we get at the back half of this career, the last year or two that you're going to be in the blue and white. How much more polish can you put on yourself as a route runner, as a guy who can fulfill different roles on the offense and plug in and be ready for that opportunity when it comes? Because, again, when I look at Malik, and as you and I know, as we've talked about before, he's got every physical skill he needs to go do it. Yeah. And he may be a guy that they have to rely on this year.
Let's go to the offensive line and shift gears a little bit. The offensive line, people watch back these podcasts from my show, and anybody that was covering Penn State football is saying this offensive line was supposed to be the best going into 2023 under James Franklin's tenure. Now, on paper, they had a lot of dudes. They had a lot of guys. But if you look at the analytics, and some people may agree or disagree, how useful a resource PFF is, Pro Football Focus. I like it. I use it. And it shows that other than Olu Fashanu and Caden Wallace, the bulk of the offensive line on most days was not good enough. It was good, but it was not good enough at times, and it put Drew Aller under duress, and certainly the running game didn't do that well as anticipated. Now you lose 3 starters from that offensive line that disappointed. Nick Dawkins, I know you're going to talk a lot about him. That's a co-host on your show over at the Lions Den. That's a former teammate of yours. That's just a good friend of yours, a great friend of yours. And you have Nolan Rucci coming in. But there's the battle, left tackle, right tackle, center is a battle as well. So let's start with center, since that is the guy who starts with the football there. Nick Dawkins, is this his job to lose?
Yeah, I think Nick Dawkins specifically, more so than a lot of the guys on that team right now, is really looked at as a leader. He's been looked at as a leader without playing a whole lot of significant reps. That's a testament to his character. That's a testament to the way he works. He's a smart guy. And you talk about the center position, a position you should be vocal and should be able to command the room and take that leadership role on. As far as personality, Nick Dawkins has every tool he needs to do that at a high level. Now, I will speak to him physically, but you got to remember, Doc came into Penn State football as a younger freshman. When I first met Doc, when I was first his teammate, Doc was still 17 years old when he early enrolled at Penn State. He spent a lot of time getting bigger and stronger. He's running really well right now. I actually just saw Doc this weekend after winter workouts. He's looking lean. He's looking physical. And I will say, as a smart player, Doc has had the opportunity to sit and watch behind two guys who are going to go play in the NFL. One already who's doing it at a high level, Juice Scruggs, and then Hunter Norzad. Doc has retained a lot of information. He's waited patiently, which is commendable to me in the transfer portal era where so many kids are happy to jump ship and go where they're going to play immediately. But he's a guy who's weathered the storm and found a way to continue to get better. And I think everybody's hope is that this year it is his job to lose, and he has the opportunity to go out there and showcase the work he's put in.
There's been rumors of possibly shifting over Benga Ioane or Sal Wormley or even the true freshman Cooper Cousins possibly getting reps at center, but I do truly believe that it is Dawkins' job to lose. Now, tackle is going to be very important because you replace not one but both of those tackle spots, and you're also losing a franchise left tackle, Nolu Fashanu. So like I said, the offensive line might have had its issues a season ago, but it certainly wasn't number 74. Drew Shelton has kind of been that prospect in waiting since he did start when Fashanu was out as a true freshman. But then he moved him over to right tackle, and then Javen Williams comes in the class of 2023 and plays a little bit. Anthony Donko sees a lot of time in the Peach Bowl against Ole Miss, surprisingly enough, when he was recruited as a guard, but played a lot of tackle in that game. And then there's Nolan Rucci, who was a former top Pennsylvania prospect, comes back to Penn State after going to Wisconsin for a few years. I like Drew Shelton and Anthony Donko to at least have the lead in this case for a position battle, but it would not surprise me in due time if Nolan Rucci is either a swing tackle at either of those spots.
Yeah, and the thing I know about Coach Franklin, Coach Troutwine too, they're going to find a way to get the five best guys on the field, whatever it looks like. Yeah. You have so many guys, like you mentioned, who can play multiple positions at a high level. The question to me becomes, like you said, you got all that talent in the backfield. The run production last year was nothing outstanding, as we all know. So those two tackle spots are important. I felt like Olu Fashanu obviously played Olu level football, but Caden Wallace, I thought, in his last year stepped up in a big way. So, you point to a guy like Drew Shelton. That's the first guy I'm looking at, has significant playing experience as a freshman, obviously going in there. We saw flashes of what he was capable of and what he may turn into. And we just talk about Doc waiting patiently. You get closer to that football, more often than not, you got to wait your turn. I'm interested to see if Drew is ready to make that transition and be that big time tackle that they need. And I think what you also got to consider is a lot of those guys can play left and right tackle. And what you're going to find is there may be one tackle who steps up and is the guy, and then you have 3-4 other guys who are competing for that other spot. It's really kind of getting where you fit in. Nolan Rucci, to me, is an interesting case. I remember when Nolan was a recruit. I remember literally warming up in Beaver Stadium, and this gigantic 15-year-old walks by me with a baby face, and now he's back at home. So is he going to step up? Javen Williams, obviously being as highly touted of a recruit as he was coming in, he's another guy that you got to pay a lot of attention to. But to me, it's really a 3 or 4 man race at those tackle spots, and it's going to be interesting to see which two come out on top.
Now, I don't want to neglect tight end. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break as we finish up offense, and then we'll go into the defensive position battles. Most importantly now, linebacker because of the position switch with Abdul Carter, and then cornerback with all the transfers coming in and all new starters at the position. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Get buckets with your first bet right now on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers, when you join, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet simply wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players, all your favorite NBA teams with things like quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. If there's a group of bets that you like, you can combine them all together into a parlay for boosted odds, boosted winnings. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And the Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it can be found on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering each and every league. Find Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and now in the free Fire TV channels app. And Aeneas, I also just want to give you a quick second. What's coming up on the Lions Den that you can share with us?
Well, I'll tell you what, we just got done filming an episode with a guy that I was really close with. Unfortunately, had to medically retire. Also, star-studded, a future star in the broadcasting game, Landon Tangwall. We had a great conversation with him about what he's up to now. Some things offensive line, some things current events. But yeah, we're pumping content, man. We're looking to get some coaches on now that we're in the off season, and there may be a little bit more time to do so. But stay tuned because we got some big time guests coming down the pipeline, I think.
Back to the offense tight end spot, because I didn't want to forget about it. But as we move past the break here, Khalil Dinkins is supposed to assume that second tight end spot because Tyler Warren returns, and we know how good he could have gone to the NFL, but I think he knows that he could have improved his draft stock and gone as a top tier man. You know, I don't want to rule out a first round, but I think a day 2 is kind of the bar for him, is the basement here, and then see if he can elevate from there going into next year's cycle. But then there's Andrew Rapplier, and then we've seen Joey Schlaffer win Workout Warrior Competitor of the Day multiple times now, and then you have the 5-star Luke Reynolds coming in to the fold as well. So it's kind of it's not to discount what Khalil Dinkins has done as that third tight end and shown that he can be a receiving threat as well as a key blocker when there was the T formation with Mike Yurcich. But there's just a lot of talent that is going to be too difficult to keep off the field.
It's tough at Penn State football unless you're a guy, a Tyler Warren, a guy who's truly proven, has played a lot of football. There's nothing that's ever just given in Penn State football. I know a lot of us like to pick the winners in the offseason and project who the starters are going to be. And that's no shade to Khalil Dinkins. We saw him do some good things too, but nobody at that number 2 tight end spot has done enough for me to sit here and say, you know, Khalil is the number 2 guy right now. I think you brought up Andrew and Joey. Those are 2 guys I know are doing a lot of good things. Jerry Cross is another guy who I think some people are sleeping on. He has continued to get leaner and leaner and really build his body up. And I'll tell you what, all of those guys, they see Theo Johnson leave. They see the success of the tight end room, and they feel like they finally have their shot to go and get on the field. So I think more so than any other position, to me, that tight end spot is interesting because I know no matter what changes get made at the offensive coordinator spot, if Penn State football can go 12 personnel when they want to, you're going to see a lot of it. That's something they want to lean on, especially with the hopes of getting that run game in a better place next season.
Well, and that's just it, Aeneas. So focusing on Andy Kotelnicki's background, he's a tight ends guy. He's an offensive line guy. Drew Aller said it in an interview when it was on weekend and had some interview media availability. And Drew said, well, the offense in terms of the basics isn't really going to be that different. Now that might scare some people and say, wait, you got to totally scrap it all together. But there were elements. You just have to use what's available to you. And if there's a lot of talented tight ends, I'm not afraid to say, why not go 13 personnel, right? Yeah. More without sans the T formation, but why not have 3 tight ends and really confuse the defense?
Yeah, I mean, the more you can give a defense in terms of looks and personnel packages, the better. If you have the horses to put 2-3 tight ends on the field, there's no problem with doing that, especially as we wait to see what that wide receiver room grows into. To me, it's about giving the offense as many options and as many different routes that they can take to be successful. When I look at elite teams across college football, they have multiple ways that they can beat you every single week. And to me, Penn State's offense wasn't that last year, and I have a hard time recalling the last time it truly was an elite level like that, where you have so many different things to consider as you prepare for them. So to me, you got a great opportunity here with 2 backs that you know that you can trust, a guy in Drew Aller who's going to continue to get better with time. If that receiver room and that tight end room can step up, if the offensive line can kind of mesh together, losing 3 guys, it could be a good opportunity for this offense to take a kickstart and to get better from where they were last year.
A lot about the offense in this episode, so don't want to forget about the defense here, because Abdul Carter moving to defensive end, I guess, creates a little competition there, but I think it just builds depth above all else. I want to see Carter get situated, but I know that Zariah Fisher and Amin Vanover are going to be the lead across from Denai Dennis Sutton at the defensive end spot. So there isn't really exactly a battle there. I think that will sort itself out. But trying to figure out who's going to be the starter at 2 of those linebacker spots now, with Abdul Carter moving from the off-ball linebacker, that number 11 spot, to defensive end, that vacates a spot. I think the only safe starter is Kobe King. Now, there's a lot of talent in that linebacker room. Dom DeLuca comes up a lot. Tyler Elston Could you shift him around and maybe have him split a little more time with Dom DeLuca at that spot? Tony Rojas is a popular name. And then there's Kavion Keys. There's Keon Wiley. So it's not like Penn State doesn't make this move without a calculation here that they can take the risk by moving your best playmaker on defense down closer to the football at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and we just talked about it with the offense, right? Whatever you can do, especially on the defensive side of the football, to get your best athletes on the field, they're going to do, and they're going to be creative about that. We watched Micah Parsons wait to make the transition back to defensive end until he was with the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm sure that there were some lessons learned in that. So Abdul Carter going down to play some end, the presence that he'll provide as a pass rusher is important, but that linebacker room, like you said, that's not a move that you make if you don't believe in the guys you have coming down the pipeline. Who are getting ready to take big steps. Tony Rojas has been a name that I have heard thrown around all over the place. I know his work ethic and his character are high quality. That's all the reports that I get from everybody around him. And I know he's working his tail off in winter workouts. Keon Wiley is another guy that I think people are really going to like as he continues to mature and understand the defense and learn how to play fast all the time. His tape is really good. And I think you bring up some interesting points with Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon. I think Kobe King's spot right now is locked in, but you can't sleep on a guy like Tyler Elsdon, who had some ups and downs last year, was well documented, but at the same time has played a lot of meaningful snaps and has everybody's respect in the room. So it's interesting. Dom DeLuca, I mean, I don't know if there's a bigger Dom DeLuca fan in the country than me. I've got his shirt. I get his spaghetti sauce when he does NIL deals. Dom is my guy, and he's another guy that you got to find a way to get on the field. He reminds me a lot of a guy like Jonathan Sutherland, who ironically wore number 0 just like he did. That's the type of character and the energy he brings to the defense. So to me, when I look at the linebacker spot, rather than who the starters are going to be, I'm considering which guys are going to factor into a rotation, because I think inevitably that's where we're heading to, because you have so many guys who you believe can go play high-level football.
And as fun as it is, Aeneas, to name starters and try to predict what the first string is going to look like on the depth chart, it's about snap count. It's about how many snaps are played. It's kind of like the same thing in basketball with minutes. The sixth man off the bench sometimes can be one of your most quality players, even though he's not in the starting lineup. I think we're going to have so many co-starters at these two linebacker spots because you can't keep them off the field. Well, we named our 3 starters, so therefore Elsdon can't get his due playing time. Or in the case of Tony Rojas, same thing too. If we name Keon Wiley the starter, because Rojas can play both outside linebacker positions. Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon, I think, are going to be the strong side because they are the more physical, bulkier linebackers. But Tony Rojas' athleticism, if we're talking about pass coverage, I would take Rojas over Elsdon in terms of you want to keep a third down linebacker on the field and switch to a 4-2-5. It's going to be Kobe King. He's got to be a 3-down linebacker. And then Tony Rojas or Keon Wiley or Kavion Keys are probably other options in that case.
Yeah, and you bring up some good points. Obviously, these guys all have different strengths and different things they bring to the table. Not to harp on the Manny Diaz departure too much more, but that was one of the things I thought he did a really good job of, was figuring out what guys' strengths were athletically and what they could bring to the defense, and then putting them in a position where they could really go win. So I look at Tom Allen, a guy that we're all excited about with a ton of head coaching experience. To me, the question is, with all these pieces on the board, without cluttering the board, can you find a way to get everybody their minutes and to keep legs fresh? Because there's value in that. I mean, you even brought up the defensive end room. You brought up Zariah and Amin. Let's not forget, Smith Vilbert is still in the building, and he's getting healthier and healthier. That's another name to add to that list. So the depth and the pieces of talent, I look at this defense, I'm still excited, even with the departures that are happening in the corner room, because there really is so much high-level talent. It's going to be interesting to see how you balance snap counts and keep guys on the field.
Let's finish the show with cornerback and then talk about the importance of winter workouts and being nominated as that competitor of the day. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch Aeneas' show, The Lions Den, with Nick Dawkins and Jerry Cross and other special guests, you can check that out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts too. Is that right?
Yes, anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you can find us there. You'll hear Nick Dawkins' yapping mouth on the show. Yep.
In this final segment, and we have given Nick Dawkins his due justice as a football player as well, but he does a great job being a co-host on the show too. As we go into the final segment, talking about cornerback, which has no certainty here because you lost not 1, not 2, but 3 starters, all multi-year starters. And that's got to be a concern coming off of a Peach Bowl game where I thought Cam Miller had some bright spots. I thought Zion Tracy did some things well. But more often than not, unfortunately for Penn State, Ole Miss was able to pick its spots, expose the secondary in this case. And I know there were some pass rushers were missing. Curtis Jacobs came out of the game early, right? So there were some other elements that allowed Penn State to be successful. You need pass rush helps out the secondary and secondary, vice versa, right? You understand that as a former defensive lineman here. But now losing 3 multi-year starters is going to be tough when you're not, when you, other than Cam Miller, everybody is still green. Like they're very new. I know how talented and all the potential that AJ Harris has. Jalen Kimber's a veteran, but they haven't been in the program. Now I would like to think that if I'm going to go with a starting 3, I would think that, what's King Mack going to do? Do they have him as a safety, or are they going to put him in the nickel cornerback spot? So that's what I'm intrigued to see who the next slot cornerback is. But if I'm going with my 2 boundary starters, I would say it's going to be Cam Miller and AJ Harris, and then maybe a Zion Tracy or an Elliott Washington as a co-starter, because it seems like Penn State likes to do that. Have a 1 cornerback and then a 2A and a 2B.
Yeah, I think there's so much I don't think you can overstate the importance of losing 3 guys to the NFL draft in 1 year. Mm-hmm. That is a tough spot to find 3 guys who can play high-level football with all those departures. Obviously, in the moment, looking at the Ole Miss game and seeing the young corners go through some struggles in, again, a New Year's Six bowl game against a really good offense, I don't look at it as a negative. That experience is really important. There's value in that, and it's a lesson heading into the offseason. And now here soon, spring ball. But I agree. I think the biggest question is who is that nickel corner going to be? For so long, we didn't ever really talk about Daquan Hardy. But Daquan Hardy, as we all know, did a hell of a job in that slot corner spot and is about to go get paid to do it in the league. I think Cam Miller on the outside is a lock. I like the way he plays. He's played some meaningful snaps before as well. The question mark to me becomes, it's really important now for AJ Harris to be a guy that you can count on to come fill that other spot. I've known Franklin and the staff, anytime they bring a transfer portal guy in, it's because they believe they can have an immediate positive contribution to either the offense or the defense or the special teams. You look at the resume of that, even on the D-line, Arnold Ebiketie, Derek Tangelo, guys that you brought in that eventually turn into NFL guys. That has to be the expectation for AJ Harris. Because if not, you're kind of just muddying up the room. But I think one thing they have that's going to really work for him and really doesn't need explained is that Terry Smith is a great coach. He teaches technique well. He gets guys to buy into the culture of the room, and those guys play their tails off. They play hard. So I think it's going to be crucially important this year, especially that Terry Smith can take command of a room that doesn't have the veteran leadership of a Joey Porter Jr. or a Kalen King or a Johnny Dixon. You got a lot of young guys who are going to need to get confident fast. And to me, that group specifically needs spring ball more than anybody. And it's great that Keandre Lambert-Smith is back for that. And Julian Fleming, a veteran, is back for that because they need valuable reps against high-quality receivers in order to be prepared for the season and the types of offenses they'll have to see.
And with these schools coming over from the Pac-12, that third corner becomes that much more important. We're going to see a lot more 4-2-5 and Chip. They're still going to play Ohio State, and they're going to have more of a spread offense, like with Chip Kelly taking over and taking a self demotion from the head coaching spot to an offensive coordinator role. But then UCLA goes out and gets Eric Bieniemy, right? And then Washington is still going to have plenty of talent. Oregon's coming over. I know they don't play the Ducks this season, but Penn State is going to have to adjust where it's still going to have to go up against the likes that play power football, like Illinois, for example, and eventually Michigan, but then have to take on these spread passing attacks of Washington, Oregon, UCLA, USC, and that's where that third cornerback becomes all the more important. But in this case, they don't have that. You pointed it out. They don't have that bona fide number 1 cornerback that they did returning. You knew Joey Porter Jr. could be on an island. You knew that Kalen King could be on an island. This year, you don't have that. So that idea that Penn State likes to have the 1 corner and then a 2A, 2B might honestly get thrown out the window this time around.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think, not to be the homer D-line guy here, but you mentioned it earlier, pass rush and pass coverage work together. So it's going to be crucially important this year, especially that first half of the season where those young guys, whatever variability of the starters it may be, you got to make sure they're comfortable and you can get home to that quarterback to give them a chance to get their feet wet and to continue to get better before it really counts. So that pass rush is going to be important. Again, I love the Abdul Carter move to the end. I think that's crucial. And yeah, those young corners with those Pac-12 teams coming in town, they're going to throw the football around. They're going to do what it takes to win, and they're going to take their shots. And if you don't have three guys that you can consistently count on to go play at a high level out there, it puts the whole defense at risk. And, again, one thing I'll say is that, once you show an opposing team on the schedule that you have a flaw or a weakness at one spot, then you're going to hear about it the rest of the season, because every team week after week is going to come in with the plan to attack that first. We're going to see if they fix the problem. And if they haven't, it's going to be a long day. And I think that those corners are in a position where they could end up that way, where maybe they are the target initially upon the season, which is why I think it's so important that spring ball and training camp, you get them as many competitive reps as you possibly can to give them the confidence to go play at a high level come September.
Let's finish with this. Aeneas, you're a former player, multiple years with the Penn State program, and there's just kind of a debate of how serious everyone should take winter workouts. Competitor of the day, because Bo Pribula's won it a lot. Drew Aller finally got his name up on the board, and then there was Ethan Grunkmeyer, and then other positions have cycled through. They've rotated. Some names have been popping up that you're like, whoa, that's eye-catching. I'm kind of in the middle when I say it's like, okay, but it's also kind of relative too. If there's an open position battle that, like we talked about on this episode specifically, it is okay to give the due respect to the player that's getting his name thrown out there as the competitor of the day. But in the case of Bo Pribula, which we addressed at the top of the show, Drew Aller's the starting quarterback, but that doesn't mean that this isn't leading to Bo Pribula getting utilized more in the offense. So there's kind of this relativeness to it. But as a former player, from your perspective, from doing it multiple years, what does that competitor title mean, and how serious should spectators take it when it's released, every other day with these practices?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd say is that the Competitor of the Day award is not a participation award. It's not a participation award, excuse me. It's not something they just give out to guys because they feel like, oh, well, if this guy doesn't win the award, then the media will think this, or the people on Twitter are going to think that, and we don't want to put him in that position. That is not what this is. They are evaluating the guys that show up. They're winning the competitions. They're winning the drills, and they're making it competitive for the rest of the guys in the room. So to me, it is important. I don't know if it's necessarily quite as important as spring ball or training camp, because obviously those are real football environments. But I will tell you that, one of my favorite Coach Franklin quotes, which he would say as often as he could, is that everything is evaluated. The environment of winter workouts is not necessarily football, but the drills that you do, the movements that you do, are all measuring athletic ability. They're all measuring how well you move. They're measuring how well you think in crucial situations when you're tired and you're exhausted and your team's counting on you. And they put you in the middle of the circle with a tire versus one other dude. There's nowhere to hide. These are all highly, highly competitive drills. It's a highly intense environment. And I think at a lot of positions, winter workouts are more relevant than you think. If you even, go back and look at the people who are actually winning them, most of the people who win those titles are going and playing significant snaps for Penn State football the next year because they're dominating movement drills. They're dominating when it's one-on-one and their back's against the wall. They find a way to go win. Those are the guys you want on the field on Saturdays. I think at the quarterback position specifically, one thing you got to understand, we talk about the drills having a lot to do with your general athleticism and what God gave you the ability to do. The quarterback position is more interesting, and it's not as cut and dry as some of the other spots, because that Bo Pribula is the more athletic kid between him and Drew Aller. So in a bunch of foot races for 45 minutes, it's not going to be super easy for Drew Aller to go out and be the competitor of the day every workout. That doesn't mean that Drew's not in there competing his tail off. Some of these narratives get created that, oh, my starting quarterback isn't competitive, or so-and-so hasn't won this workout. He's not in there going as hard as he can. That's not the reality of it. Those guys are in there busting their tails. Everybody wants to win. It is a highly competitive environment. It's not easily done, which is a credit to Bo, and it's not a knock on Drew. But I think you got to take some of it with a grain of salt, but understand that this isn't all for naught at 99% of the positions. And a lot of times it's an indicator of which guys are ready to make that leap and step up.
If you enjoy these conversations, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Let us know down in the comments section the key position battles you're looking at for Penn State football going into the spring and then ultimately into the fall when the games really, truly do matter. If you want to keep up with Aeneas, follow him on X, formerly known as Twitter, and then with the Lions Den podcast and show over at State Media on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts as well. Aeneas, I appreciate the time as always, and can't wait to do this again and hopefully the not too distant future.
Yeah, Zach, appreciate you having me. It's always a great time, great show. Keep doing your thing. I hope to be back soon, brother.